Let's jump right into one of the fiercest intellectual showdowns of the 19th century. In one corner, you've got Frederick Engels, Karl Marx's right-hand man. And in the other corner, a German philosopher who pretty much declared he had figured everything out. This wasn't just some academic debate, you guys. This was a battle for the soul of socialism, and really, for how we even think about history itself.
So first, let's meet one of our main characters, Herr Eugen Dühring. And you have to get this, the quote you're looking at isn't something a critic said about him. Nope. That's how he described himself. The man didn't just think he was right, he was convinced he was the one and only true philosopher for his era and for the future. Talk about confidence, right?
And, well, when you think you're the final word on everything, you don't exactly have a lot of time for the competition. Dühring just unleashed on his rivals, but he saved some of his most creative insults for Karl Marx. He dismissed his work as snotty, backward, and just plain buffoonery. Yeah, this was not your typical polite academic disagreement. This was a brawl. So you might be wondering, why did Engels bother to write a whole book in response? I mean, it seems so personal. But it's because underneath all that name-calling, there was a really critical question at stake. This was a clash between two totally different ways of seeing the world. One that believes in fixed, absolute truths, and another that sees everything as being in a state of constant, dynamic change.
Now, to really get what Engels is arguing, we have to rewind a little and look at what came before him. He starts his whole case by pointing out what he saw as a huge flaw in early socialist ideas, a problem he called utopianism. So Engels kind of traces this family tree of thought. It starts with the French philosophers back in the 18th century, who were all about the power of pure reason. And that thinking led to these three big utopian thinkers, Saint-Simon, Fourier, and Owen. And look, these guys were brilliant. They were deeply upset by the injustice they saw, and they came up with these incredible, radical new blueprints for society.
But here's the catch, at least according to Engels. Each one of these guys thought they had stumbled upon the one, universal, absolute truth for how society should work. It wasn't that their ideas grew out of history, it was more like a mere happy accident. It was as if the world was just sitting around waiting for a genius like them to finally be born and solve everything.
So what happens when Saint-Simon has his absolute truth, and Fourier has his, and Owen has his? Well, you get what Engels so memorably called a mishmash. It's this eclectic jumble of amazing ideas and grand visions that unfortunately all contradicted each other. It might have been inspiring, sure, but it wasn't a science.
So, to get out of this mishmash, Engels argued that socialists needed a totally new tool, a fundamentally different way of thinking about reality itself, and he believed that tool could be found in German philosophy. He basically contrasts two big modes of thought. Over on the left, you've got what he calls the metaphysical view. This way of thinking sees things as separate, fixed, and unchanging. Something either is or it isn't, black and white. But on the right, you've got dialectical thought, which sees everything as interconnected and always in motion. It gets that opposites, like, say, cause and effect, aren't so rigid. They can actually flow into each other, and even trade places.
And for Engels, this wasn't just some abstract philosophical game. He was like, just look around you. Nature itself is the ultimate proof of dialectics. Nothing just is. A planet forms, a star dies, a seed becomes a plant, which then decays back into the soil. Everything, absolutely everything, is a process. Okay, so armed with this new method, this dialectical way of seeing the world, Engels believed that socialism could finally be taken out of the world of dreams and put on solid scientific ground. And he says it was Karl Marx who made the two key discoveries that made it all possible.
The whole point was to get socialism out of the clouds and plant it firmly in the real world. The question wasn't anymore, what's the most perfect society we can imagine? The question became, how does our society actually work, and how does it change over time? And here they are. For Engels, these are the two pillars that elevated socialism to a science. First, a completely new way to understand history, and second, a way to crack the code of capitalism itself. So, discovery number one was this. the materialist conception of history. To put it simply, it's the idea that the real foundation of any society is its economy. How people make things, buy things, sell things. All the other stuff, politics, laws, even art and philosophy, it's all built on top of that economic base. So for Engels, history isn't driven by big ideas or great men, it's driven by the very real struggles between economic classes.
Then we have the second big discovery, which gets right to the engine of capitalism, surplus value. Here's the basic idea. Let's say a worker gets paid enough to live on from 4 hours of their work, but they work an 8-hour day. So the value they create in those extra 4 hours, that's surplus value, and it goes straight to the owner as profit. This unpaid labor is where capital comes from. For Engels, this wasn't about morality. It was just the fundamental math of the system.
All right, so now that we've got all that under our belt, we can circle all the way back to Herr Dühring and finally understand why Engels saw him as such a huge step in the wrong direction.
Remember this guy? Dühring's entire system, his whole brand, was built on this claim that he had found it, the final and ultimate truth. A perfect, unchanging system of knowledge that would be true forever. And this is where the two worldviews just completely collide. You have Dühring over here offering up these final fixed principles. But if you're looking at things dialectically, like Engels was, the very idea of a final truth about a world that is always changing just doesn't make sense. It's a flat-out contradiction. For Engels, knowledge isn't a destination you arrive at, it's a process that never ends.
So, at the end of the day, this whole thing wasn't really personal for Engels. In his view, Dühring, for all his revolutionary talk, was actually taking a giant leap backward. He was making the exact same mistake the old Utopians had made, cooking up a perfect system in his own head, totally detached from the real, messy, changing world. The fight wasn't about Dühring the man, it was about the method itself.
And really, that leaves us with a question that's so much bigger than 19th century socialism. How do we think progress actually works? Are we getting closer and closer to some single final truth about everything? Or is knowledge always part of a messy, dynamic, and never-ending process of conflict, change, and evolution? What do you think?